Welcome to the artist interview series for Mad in America's online exhibition, Creativity and COVID, Art Making During the Pandemic, which is live on madinamerica.com. This exhibit features artists with lived experience of mental distress and explores how art making helped to cope with the emotional impact of the pandemic. Today's interview is with Ellie Page, who submitted this work of a raised fist with pink and blue marbled ink, titled Keep Fighting, It's Worth It. So welcome everybody. I'm here with Ellie Page. Hello, Ellie.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Very happy to be here.
Great. I'm happy to have you here today. So we're going to ask you a few questions and we'll see how it goes.
Sure.
So first off, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name's Ellie. I just turned 28 and I live in Manchester in the UK. I was born in Southeast London and then went to university in Oxford, lived in Berlin for a little bit and then moved to Manchester about 5 or 6 years ago, and I consider Manchester my home now probably. And yeah, I've had some ongoing health conditions when I was younger, but only about 3 or 4 years ago did they all sort of escalate and become really permanent and affect my mobility. There was quite a big shift in how my life changed then.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and that's when I started making more art, I think. But I'm sure we're going into that later.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, really, is how did you get into art?
Well, I used to write a lot when I was a mad teenager and onwards, and I did English lit at university, and I've always enjoyed art and been involved in the arts world, but didn't really like draw or do any kind of visual or fine art stuff myself. And then I was doing my health got a lot worse and I had to leave my job as a youth worker because I couldn't be on my feet anymore, like 50 hours running around after kids. Sadly,
yeah,
even though I loved
that's
it.
A lot. That's a lot for anybody.
Yeah, my hips did not love it. They
oh
couldn't do
no,
it.
Yeah.
And so I'd actually had my first placement for a master's in social work. And I did it at a place in Stockport called Arts and Recovery in the Community. And they are a wonderful combination of an art gallery and art space and a mental health charity. So I worked alongside lots of different artists who taught me like just loads of different new ways to play with arts materials. And I'd been doodling and doing things myself, just sort of as a coping method, I guess, once I stopped working full time, because I just didn't know what else to do. And I had all these feelings. And I think that, I have to be journaling or doing something with them, because I don't know how people can get through without having some kind of like release, even if it's just like scribbling angry thoughts or doodling things.
Yeah.
So I was already doing that, but then I started working with artists who taught me more techniques and like different things to do. And I used to run an art class every week on an acute adult mental health ward. And I just really loved it. And because of my health problems, I was doing the placement part-time. So instead of being there for a few months, I was actually there for like almost a year. But I think that's when I properly got into making my own art and playing with different materials at home.
That's so cool. So when you were learning all these different ways to play with art from these artists, did you have a favorite medium or type of work that you wanted to make?
Well, because I'd played with bits before and had always been sort of arty, but without really seriously doing anything myself. I remember having a conversation with someone who had used to go to the groups and now was actually an artist who led workshops, and she's an amazing watercolor artist. And I remember being like, oh, I just don't know how you do it. I can't deal with watercolor.
Watercolor is so hard. I agree.
It's so hard. I was just like, I don't know what to do with it. It just, it never does what I want. And I just get really confused and everything smuggles.
Yeah.
And she said, well, that's why I love watercolor, because apart from with art, I'm quite like clear cut and like to control sort of how things are.
Yeah.
And she said with watercolor, you can never tell what it's going to do next. Like you put it on the page and then,
Right.
you know, it
It's almost like an
dribble
exercise.
one way or it could dribble another way.
Yeah, it's like an exercise in acceptance, right? Like,
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, okay. And that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
But the materials that I most like choosing is, like, you can see this big mess behind me. I'm a big fan of making a mess because
Nice. Yes.
I think you should enjoy, like, I don't know, I've
And
never made anything because of I'd like to create a piece that looks like art to other people. It's more just
you
like
were
I
saying in
feel,
your statement, you said a little bit about that, that you would rather, you know, make art for yourself. And I know a lot of our artists feel that way, is you know, that that's an important stage, you know, for artists, is to be making art just for you, you know.
yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, it's funny
And
talking about art because it's hard not to sound floaty and pretentious because some of the
yes, it
phrases are
is.
so cliche,
Yeah,
but
it's true.
but you genuinely mean them.
So we can move into the next question, which is, how did art making help you through the pandemic?
Um, it's quite hard to quantify it, really. The pandemic um, has been so weird, obviously,
Yeah.
understatement of the century.
Right,
Um,
right.
but at the start, I feel like there was something very weirdly, almost like not exciting, I guess novel about it. So at the start, um, I ranged between sort of defensive sarcasm and humor, being like, well, you know, I have a lot of health conditions, I'm poorly a lot of the time, therefore I'm pretty good at staying inside and I've already figured out how to, you know, live my life comfortably within the confines of my house.
Right, right.
You know, like I'll sort of boo-hoo for everyone else who now suddenly,
Right now
like,
they have to do that.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So it ranged between that and then having like a really, really sudden, like a thump in the heart that
Yeah.
just like, oh God, if I catch this, I will die.
Right, right.
And I think when you have mental health difficulties of any kind, you sort of, up to pre-pandemic, you can be in situations where you maybe have suddenly convinced yourself that that's the case and it feels really real at the time.
Mm.
Um, and you've had those dark thoughts and things before, but this time it was a bit like a double whammy because it
Mm.
was like I'd be suddenly hit by the fear and then suddenly there's another hit that's like, it's also very likely that I will catch it,
Yeah, yeah.
no matter what I do.
Right.
And then that made the, I don't know, because I don't know, just statistically, that seemed to me to make it more certain that it was more likely that I was going to be killed by this thing.
Yeah, yeah. It was very hard, to
Yeah.
stay away from that, the height of that anxiety. Me too. It was
Mm.
um, extremely hard to calm your nervous system down enough to be in a place where you could imagine not getting it, or living,
Yeah.
you know, getting through it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And because I've had loads of, you know, you get bad news from the doctor and then you have that sort of feeling for a week,
Yeah.
but then you sort of carry on with your life. But this one sort of, you know, it's been on and off, just suddenly hitting you really hard for
Yeah.
over a year.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
and and when you were engaging with the artwork, did it help with that?
yeah, definitely. So when I didn't know what to do, as has been the case for the last 3 years, um, I was doing lots of like, I don't know if it's journaling because I'm not following a method, but I'm a big believer in always having a notebook or sketchbook
Mhm.
in everywhere you go, like every room of the house.
Yeah, yeah.
My case is like 2 rooms, but and yeah, it was sort of, I think it sort of allowed me to be in my own be on my own and be in my own headspace a bit. So my partner came to stay with us for the pandemic. But sometimes everything just gets a bit claustrophobic, and
sure.
you're not, although, you know, with mental health especially, you spend so many years in and out of therapy, putting together your own toolkit of coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
You know, the most basic ones of which are like, leave the house.
Get
For
take a
10
walk,
minutes,
right.
or like, go and sit somewhere outside or something like that, and
Yeah,
suddenly you
it's so
can't do any of
true.
those.
We did
So
lose a lot of our coping mechanisms, you know, things that would help us,
yeah,
definitely. So
but I still had art, so I just got back into, you know, having an emotional journal of angry drawings and trying out different art materials, and then eventually went back to playing with drawing ink, which is my favorite
yeah, that's great.
thing probably. But that, to me, that was the equivalent of like going outside and getting some air.
Yeah, like almost going inwards.
Yeah, it's like I'm
And
just going in
finding,
my weird color
yeah,
bubble.
yeah, right,
So
right, right. Finding your headspace and being sort of finding uh, yeah, definitely. So a final question would be, you know, how do you feel that, you know, through this pandemic, a lot of us, you know, all of us have been through a lot. And I wonder, you know, I've been asking all the artists, how do they feel that art making can help us heal through this pandemic, the trauma of the pandemic, as a society, not just as individuals, but as a society?
as a society, I think it might be the only healing method.
Mm.
I think art might be the only healing method, because the other thing that has made the pandemic so difficult for everyone is we're not just referring to the COVID pandemic, we're referring to all of everything that's been on the news for the last
Yes.
18 months. The Black Lives Matter protests, everything going on with Trump. I
Mm.
know it's weird because it's your country, but a
No,
lot
I get that.
people here felt very, very affected by it as well, and really felt for you.
It
And
wasn't just an American phenomenon. Yeah.
no, yeah, it's a symbol of something scarier, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's all that stuff going on that's been happening over the last 18 months. I think combined with the fact that everyone's stuck inside and working
Mm,
from home if they can, people are online more, using social media more, and
mm,
there's more, just the news is just awful
mm,
all the time. It's
mm.
it's so stressful to just open your laptop, because the only public discourse that you're given, you know, a preview into by mainstream media is all so negative, and it
Mhm.
feels inescapable. Like every day there's something more awful happening,
Yeah.
and it's not that you need that we should be ignoring what's happening, but I think that is really important to notice as part of what's been really hard about the pandemic for
Yes.
everyone, like
Mhm.
all the other stuff going on. So art wise, I think one of the hardest things about that was just feeling so helpless,
Mm.
and so many people, like all this stuff going on, and you have that feeling as an activist anyway.
Mm.
Like you get slumps where you're like, why am I bothering? I can't change the government
Yeah.
as like one person. Why am I bothering to do this?
Right.
And I think being stuck indoors intensified that more, because you know we couldn't do like bodies
You
on the
really
street
were limited.
the
Yeah.
same way, at least here.
Yeah.
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 Um, so as a society, I think the way we need to move forward anyway is to just take a breath
Mm.
and everyone on all sides remind one another that just constant, I don't know, rage and bickering about the small things isn't allowing us to move forward and to heal together.
Mm.
And the people's voices who need to be heard still, even though we've been stuck indoors for ages, are not really being heard.
Right.
And I think that sometimes it's really hard for people to verbalize what they've been through. But I think you could gain such an insight into how people are feeling if you gave, say, 1,000 people in every country like some art materials and a sketchbook, and just ask them to fill it in every day for a week with anything. Looking at that at the end would provide more social commentary and information on how to move forward than any of the like just horrible negative media that's just been barraging everyone and then makes everyone not want to look at it at all and not want to engage at all.
That sounds like an amazing project, actually. Like,
Great, wouldn't it?
yeah, that would be an amazing project. Maybe we can collaborate on that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great place to end it. On that note, on that, hopeful and great way forward that you're talking about here. Thank you so much for having this interview with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.